Welcome. Thank you for coming to today's session, which is on evolving research evaluation for positive change, data, community and beyond. And my name is Emma Crott. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Evaluation of Research Interest Group for the RDA. So I'd like to start today's session with just acknowledging and celebrating the first Australians on whose lands we meet today, which is the Turrbal and Yagara peoples of Meanjin, and pay my respects to elders past and present. And I'd like to acknowledge that Indigenous Australians are the first data custodians in this land. So I'd also just like to welcome our new RDA members, and it's great to see so many faces here today. And as we know, there are 6 guiding principles at the heart of the RDA community, which definitely drives our work in this interest group. So as I mentioned, I'm Emma. I'm Chief of Staff at the Australian Research Data Commons, and I'm co-chair of the Evaluation of Research Interest Group, along with my colleagues, 2 of whom are in the room today, which is very exciting because we've not all been together ever before in person. So unfortunately, Francoise is online, was unable to travel to Australia, but welcome, Francoise. So from France, then we have Devika here from India, and Amy is here from the US. So it's really fantastic that our interest group has not only such a broad representation from across the world in terms of co-chairs, but we also have a very broad diversity of backgrounds and research areas. So I am the token advocate for creative arts research outputs in thinking about the evaluation metrics. The other thing I should say is we've got a collaborative notes document. I know it's sometimes a little bit tricky in the room, but I would encourage you to please pop your details in there, and as well as any thoughts that come up throughout the session, and we'll also be taking copious notes and encourage discussion as well. So today's agenda is pretty focused because we did have 2 activities before this session at the plenary, which are informing some of the things that we're going to talk about today. So I'll give you an update on the Asia Pacific workshop that we held last month. And we're very lucky to have a guest speaker with us today. So Carl Huang from COARA, which is the Curtin Open Knowledge Institute. So all the way from Perth, he's joined us. We'll also give an update on one of our work, which is the Registry of Relevant Initiatives. We'll have a little chat about some of the disciplinary aspects that inform research evaluation, as well as one of our outputs, which is being updated at the moment. We'll then also have a discussion on some liaison with other RDA groups, and I've been fortunate enough to attend a few sessions this week where I can definitely see more opportunities for liaison. So if we're not already in touch with you, we'd love to hear from you. And we've got Stephanie Kevers with us, who will speak about the uptake of digital research infrastructure interest group. And then the obvious next steps, where do we go from there? So I might start by just providing a really brief overview of the interest group. So the assessment and evaluation of research must evolve to enable the open science agenda, particularly the associated data and software components. It is important that research evaluation moves from the bibliographic index-based criteria to take into account the breadth of research outputs. As stated in the Agreement on Reforming Research Assessment, it is necessary to recognise the diversity of contributions to and careers in research in accordance with the needs and nature of the research. So the Evaluation of Research Interest Group was born. And the aim of the group is to advocate for fair data and software as research outputs within research evaluation frameworks. This contributes to incentivising contributions to open science, as well as bolstering research integrity and reproducibility. Evolving current research evaluation frameworks is long overdue and is necessary to ensure we keep pace with current research practices. If there is no change to how we evaluate the quality and impact of research, then researchers who contribute to the open science agenda continue to do so at their own risk, with potentially significant administrative and sometimes financial burdens. So we seek to build on the significant expertise of the RDA community to contribute to global discussions on the evaluation of research, which is no mean feat. A key objective is to coordinate relevant RDA efforts and liaise with and contribute expertise to funders. So we're very lucky to have Lee Harris in the room here today, who works for the Australian, oh my gosh, Research Council. I was about to say the ARDC. No, the Australian Research Council, which is one of the funders for research in Australia. We also liaise with other organisations as well as the Coalition on Advancing Research Assessment, CoARA, and other global research evaluation assessment initiatives. So we have established liaisons, so RDA's reach across the international community, including research organisation and funders, and the diverse profile of its individual members, can help to facilitate and align a global discussion on research evaluation, drawing on data experts from a range of domains. So within RDA, we have liaisons with the SHARC interest group, as well as the Artificial Intelligence and Data Visitation Working Group, which is linked with the CoARA Working Group on Ethics and Research Integrity Policy in Responsible Research Assessment for Data and Artificial Intelligence. That is a bit of a mouthful, which is why we're always using acronyms, isn't it? And as I mentioned, we have Stephanie with us here today on the uptake of digital infrastructure interest group. And I also attended the infrastructure for non-traditional research outputs and processes interest group session earlier this week, which I think will also be relevant for our discussions later on the disciplinary aspects of research evaluation. There's so many other relevant initiatives, but these are just a few that we are talking with. So we have CoARA, as I mentioned, Make Data Count, Force 11 Data Usage Typologies Working Group, and the Data Sharing Index Challenge. And we'll be sharing this presentation at the end of the session, so if you want links to these things, they'll be in there. And we'll also speak about the registry that we're developing. So just a very brief overview of some of the current work. So the registry that I've mentioned, and Amy will speak about that later today. We're also pursuing the liaison with CoARA, who we just hosted a collaborative session with for the Asia Pacific region. We're also looking at the updating the RDA value for evaluation of research, which again, Amy will speak to. And one thing that I didn't include on this slide that I really encourage you to look at is we also contributed to the value of the RDA for policy white papers. So this is a really fantastic resource that the RDA put together, and it included research evaluation, work on national PID strategies, and journal research data policy framework. So a really fantastic output from RDA there. So now I'm just going to provide a little update on the Asia Pacific workshop that was held on the 17th of September. So this was in collaboration with CoARA, and it was specifically designed for the Asia Pacific region, with the Asia Pacific region time zone in account, because as we all know, working across the global community can sort of be quite challenging for us in this region. We were looking to explore how research evaluation is evolving in the region, and participants shared their insights on goals and common challenges and explored implementation pathways for advancing research evaluation in the Asia Pacific context. So like all good RDA workshops, we did a Mentimeter. And so The research evaluation landscape is characterised by dominant themes of being publication-focused, confusing, and driven by university rankings. And I think there's no surprise there that this is not just specific to Asia Pacific, but is a global challenge. There's widespread recognition that the system is overly reliant on traditional bibliometric indicators while lacking clear direction for reform. So there were 3 interconnected challenges that emerged as most pressing. One was funding constraints that limit meaningful evaluation reform. The second was cultural resistance to change within academic institutions. And the third was a lack of clear direction on how to move forward with alternative approaches. Respondents also highlighted issues around the tension between traditional metrics and newer evaluation methods, the slow pace of change, and uncertainty around policy directions. And this was in particular noting the retirement of the Evaluation of Research Australia process in Australia. When asked about effective reform strategies, responses clustered around government policy changes as the primary lever, and this becomes quite interesting when we look at the next slide, and then modifications to funding requirements, institutional initiatives, and the implementation of international frameworks like CoARA and DORA. So we put forward some slightly controversial statements to see where participants were sitting, and there was strong disagreement that traditional metrics should remain the primary criteria, which I think is no surprise, but worth just teasing out. There was moderate support for cultural sensitivity over international standardisation, and so I think this will generate some interesting discussion shortly. And then there was low confidence in AI technology improving fairness, and strong agreement that societal impact should equal traditional bibliometrics. There was a neutral stance on whether researchers understand the need for reform, which I found quite interesting because I thought that would be quite prevalent. And then there was moderate agreement that current funding structures prevent meaningful change. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to pause here for a little bit of discussion, and I do have a slightly provocative question, I guess, which is government policy change ranked highest in this one as the most effective reform pathway, yet many noted waiting for government to say what they want was a key challenge. And so how do we break this circular dependency between institutions wanting or waiting for policy signals and policy makers waiting for sector consensus? And I've got a microphone here.
Hands. Who's got hands?
I knew it. I feel like I put that question in just for Lee.
Lee Harris, Australian Research Council. I think fundamentally just chat to each other. I think the ARC as a funder is sort of an interesting nexus between academia and the wider government. So we are so uniquely placed, I think, to drive and represent and have some of that stewardship. So I guess it depends on champions on both sides to make sure those things are sort of carried through. But don't be static. Just sit there and engage with funders. Talk to them. I think it's the only way, and really sort of establish those relationships.
Excellent.
I hope so. No, maybe what?
Is the mic working? Do we know? Francoise, could you hear that? Oh, yep. Okay.
Hello. Salut, Francoise. So this is Natalie Harwer, Canadian Research Data Centre Network. This is the $1 million question. If we had an answer to it, we'd be in better shape. I think a lot of researchers are quite invested in the current metrics because they've learned that's what they have to do, and they're going to keep doing it. So it is hard to change it, even if we think it's in their best interests or in the best interests of open science. I have heard from funders when I've discussed this topic that there is some concern about moving ahead on mandates if the other pieces aren't entirely in place. So do we have diamond open access repositories for you to put your paper in that are fit to your discipline? Are there sufficient places to place your data, repositories that fit? So that's the hesitation that I've heard from funders about trying to push forward, but the cultural context really changed. I've moved from being in a European context into Canada, where in my previous place, smaller country in Ireland, there was felt to me like a little more ability to move ahead with those mandates. I think a smaller size, less complex politically country was able to do that. So there's so many different factors that come into play. What I think one of the best things you can do is the funder, needs to have that mandate in mind and to build a pathway that is communicated for that. So it's not like tomorrow you have to do this, but in 5 years you're going to have to do this. And now it's 4 years, and here's the things we've built. And now it's 3 years, and we have some money to build this repository, so you can go and do that. That's what I think is what I've seen work is giving timelines that are ample enough that you can get your ducks in a row.
Thank you. And I think that your comment there speaks to the need for infrastructures as well, like the Australian Research Data Commons where I work, to be involved in those conversations as well, because they are providing the supporting mechanisms for those.
And maybe I can just continue on with the Canadian context and
name and
where
you're
sorry,
from. Thank you.
Matthew Lucas from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. One of the things, so when looking at policy changes around open science, whether data or open access, there are a lot of different levels of that have influence on that. Obviously, the funders, the individual researchers, the departments, and then the institutions. And on the data side, one of the things that we required, which I think is a bit unique among data management policy requirements, was that institutions develop public strategies to support data management, not policies, but strategies to support the data management requirements that were coming into effect, as Madalli said, 2-3 years down the road, so that they would be publicly signaling how they were going to support the needs of their researchers to, and one of the things we found that requirement did was it forced institutions to suddenly start thinking seriously about their role in that bigger piece. And it pulled together different parts of the universities, so librarians, research offices, ethics groups, CIO offices that often hadn't spoken before. So it was a useful tool just for that as well, getting the institution to talk.
Thank you. And I think Amy's taking furious notes. Thank you. Did anyone else want to say anything about that sort of tension between government policy and the need for institutions and others to get on board? Yes?
Yeah, hi, Scott McWhirter from the University of Technology, Sydney. I suppose a lot of it comes back to what the purpose of the evaluation is. So is it about sharing and celebrating best practice and being congratulatory, or is it distributive, or so that affects essentially what is measured and why?
I guess we're probably talking, like if we're talking in a very specific way, we're probably talking about research evaluation for researchers for their career progression, as well as for institutions to demonstrate their relevancy and the quality and all of that of the research coming out of their institutions. But I do recognise there is a larger sort of contextual piece as well around, that's potentially why the evaluation of research in Australia system that we had before was not entirely working with the rankings and things like that. So what is it that we're trying to achieve? I do have one more question which might promote some conversation, and that's the other thing that came out of the Mentimeter and the conversation was recognising the need for cultural sensitivity while international standardisation tensions are evident throughout the responses. So how do we create evaluation frameworks that are both regionally appropriate and globally legible, or is this an impossible balance? is there? Sure. So, yep, so cultural sensitivity, the need for cultural sensitivity is high, but there's, while international standardization tensions are evident throughout the responses. So how do we create evaluation frameworks that are both regionally appropriate and globally legible or globally recognized? Or is that an impossible balance? Yes.
Thank you. Fiona Bradley from UNSW. I mean, I guess, you know, to throw a question back at you would be, are there sort of globally agreed sort of frameworks for this that exist right now that other countries can localise to their own situations, or are we still sort of in search of that? So, you know, CoARA is one initiative that's doing fantastic work in this space, but could you say that we have actually arrived at the sense of what that global framework is that can then, like as in any other domain, development and so forth, can very easily be localised?
I mean, one that I know about, that I was also at UNSW and was aware of the DORA being utilised in the Australian context, so the UK. Does anyone know what it stands for, actually? Declaration on Research Assessment, yeah, and that came out of the UK. So utilising that in an Australian specific context was happening when I was there a few years ago, and I don't know if that's progressed. But that's obviously at an institutional level, not at a national level. So I'll throw it open to the audience as well for comments. No? Okay. Oh, Stephanie, sorry.
So this is probably a very sort of simplified and simple solution, which may not work, but it reminds me a little bit like the question of how much specificity and how much generality you need. It's a little bit like metadata, you know, you want the standards that apply to everyone, but you also want stuff that applies to your own discipline. So the solution could be a combination of those things, and having like a toolbox of standards that anyone would use or could agree on, which is a different problem, of course, a difficult problem, of course, but having something that is more global and then adding to that with different weightings your local, more culturally appropriate measures. Maybe that's a solution, I don't know.
That's great. Oh, Devika?
Okay. I can only speak to the Indian context. So it was mentioned here that for two particular purposes, I mean, they are the overwhelming purposes that we consider research evaluation. One is the career progression, and the other is rankings, which are all important for the institutions. So these are, in my view, a scientific culture within countries or within regions. That is what they are dependent upon. And then when we try to fit this into an international things, many things may not fit. Just like Stephanie told about metadata, we would have to take an international standard. That is a standard, but still, you know, turn it around to suit the, localize it. So I think the same stands in that case also. Thank you.
Well, I think that's a good point now where I'll hand over to Carl from the Curtin Open Knowledge Institute so we can hear about some of the work happening in the Australian context. If I can, yeah, I can't find the, there we go. There we go. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Carl Huang, and thanks Emma for inviting us to this talk, or to the session. So initially was going to be me and Lucy, but unfortunately Lucy couldn't be here. So you'll just be having me for the slides, going through the slides. So I've been asked to talk about CoKI and what you're doing and the capabilities. So CoKI stands for Curtin Open Knowledge Initiative. So before I get into the actual slides, just a warning that there'll be a whole bunch of QR codes throughout the slides. Just for those of you who might want to do something while I'm talking, not just listening to me, you feel welcome to scan the QR code. It will take you to various dashboards and things that you can explore. So quickly introducing myself, I'm from Curtin University. I've been with CoKey since 2018, so quite a long time. And beginning of this year, I've took on the director role for CoKey and also the director role for the Center for Culture and Technology at Curtin. So it's been quite an exciting year for me, I guess. And yeah. Yep, and Lucy, she's now taken on the Dean of Research role at Curtin for the Faculty of Humanities, and she's also the co-founder and the former co-lead for CoKey. So I've basically taken over from her from the beginning of this year, but she's obviously still involved. Again, so as I warned you, there'll be a lot of QR codes, so that's the first two. Oh, actually, sorry, there was the one on the first page, so that's the next two. So this will take you to two of the things I will be talking about later on in the slides. So you can scan those QR codes, it'll take you to those dashboards that you can play around with. They will come up again later on as well when we get to them. But these are just two of the examples demonstrating some of the capabilities that we have at CoKey, resulting from the actual data infrastructure that we have built. So quickly a bit of background. So CoKey started in 2018, so that's when I joined. And we started off with really just 4 researchers. And it's a collaboration between the Center for Culture and Technology, which is sitting inside the humanities, which is interesting because then we collaborated with the Curtin Institute for Data Science, which is sitting inside the science faculty. So it's a real interdisciplinary, interfaculty collaboration. And Emma talked about the issues about university rankings, and actually that's how this project actually started with, came out of frustration from a few researchers that universities are very focused on university rankings, and that's driving changes, not necessarily always in the positive sense. And in particular, where we're sitting inside the Faculty of Humanities, where a lot of our work are not really presented in those kind of global rankings. So we started thinking about, well, what do we actually want from, what we want to change if we want to move away from university rankings. And it was at a time where open access and open science was a big theme that was going on around the world. And we thought about, what if we go broader? What do we talk about? If we talk about more than just open science and open access, what about open knowledge that, in a broader sense, that covers everything from knowledge production to knowledge dissemination, talking about openness all the way through, and talking about diversity, equity, and everything related to those themes. So what we really wanted was to think about what universities are if we have open knowledge as the core for our university as institutions. Well, what would be a better way to start the project by actually writing a book? So first few months within the project started, we invited a few experts in related areas, and we went away and locked ourselves up in a remote area in Western Australia. And within 2-3 days, we wrote a book together. And basically what we did was really ask ourselves, if we have university as open knowledge institutions, what we would like the main characteristics of these institutions to be, and what are they for, and how do we measure open knowledge institutions? So that's what kind of really kicked off then the project, and we also went away a year later to Mauritius, inviting even more people to come together. This has actually happened on the Curtin campus in Mauritius. So we came together, had a workshop, and we kind of kicked off a coalition of open knowledge institutions and talked about how we actually move those related agendas going forward. And throughout the years, we worked with various partners, funders, and collaborators. For example, we worked with OAPEN and Mellon Foundation on books in particular open access books, and we were interested in what the usage of open access books looked like in compared to closed books. We also worked with UNESCO on the Open Science Outlook report, and currently we're also working with them on the Global Science report that's is aiming to come out next year. We also worked with Invest in Open Infrastructure on the State of Open Infrastructure report, which comes out annually. We are working on into the third iteration of that report now. So we've been working with a lot of partners throughout the years, and of course also CWTS, and those you will be familiar with the Leiden rankings. Last year there was the Open Edition, which we were quite involved in. So that's the timeline for CoKey. So as I mentioned, we started off with just really four researchers led by Lucy and Cameron Lennon. We started off with doing a lot of things manually with spreadsheets, CSV files, Excel files, collecting a lot of data really manually, so small data per se, and a lot of manual work. Then what really kicked off was in 2019, 2020 when we started automation. We got more of the data scientists from the Curtin Institute of Data Science to get involved, and we started putting things onto cloud and ingesting big open data sources, and that kind of kicked off with a lot of projects dealing with diversity of data, combining data together, and to give you an idea of what data, the size of data we got, so by the end of 2024, we got about 150 million unique DOIs in our data, which is quite significantly more than what you would get out of Scopus and Web of Science, for example. And last year, we also won the tender to become a preferred supplier, or on the list of preferred suppliers for the Australian government for research evaluation and bibliometric analysis. So we're kind of really grown from really a small team to a lot of big projects. And not going into a lot of detail about what the data actually looks like, but we do ingest quite a few different data sources. Now, the main data table that we have combines Crossref, OpenLX, Unpaywall, and RAW, which gives you like a huge table of list of DOIs with a whole bunch of metadata associated with those DOIs. But on top of that, we actually also ingest other data sources like DataSite, OpenAir, and many others. So that all together actually gives you more than 13 trillion data points, which is quite huge, and that's all sitting on the Google Cloud Platform. And what that enables us to do is, that brings quite a lot of new opportunities in terms of the data analysis and visualization. And the first one is the obvious one to go to. We produced the Open Access Dashboard, so this is a global dashboard which contains data for more than 200 countries and more than 50,000 institutions. And so if you scan that QR code, it'll take you to their website, and you can actually then play around with it, and then you can filter the data down to your own institution if you like. You can also look at filter things down to just regions or specific countries. And you can also actually filter by institution types. If you just want, for example, educational institutions, or do you want government institutions, you can do all of that. And this dashboard is actually freely accessible with the whole workflow all documented openly online. So in theory, you can actually take those workflows and those codes together and produce your own dashboard. So that's the Open Access Dashboard. And this one here is also quite interesting. So this is what you call the RISE dashboard. So I think it stands for Research Impact Evaluation System, yes. So basically what this does is actually replicate the ERA process. So those of you not familiar with the ERA process, I think it stands for Excellent in Australia, Excellent in Research Australia, which used to be the national evaluation framework for Australia, and it had a set of guidelines as to how you put the whole evaluation together, and it used to be a really expensive process for universities because there's a lot of work to put the data together, partly automated, partly manual, and so on. But what we've done here is actually we've taken those guidelines and actually replicated using open data and using an automated process. So we actually produced this for all the universities in Australia. And if you go into that QR code, it'll take you to the demo version of it, which I think only goes up to 2019 or 2020, but then the full version that we have actually goes up to the latest data. And you can also actually shift between the fields of research and the fields of education, which has proved to be quite useful, especially for things like textile purposes. So yeah, so we have the open access dashboard, which is kind of the global dashboard, and then we got this, which is for Australia. And then we got this another example of something we did was some of our data got ingested into Africa Archive, which is also quite interesting for country profiles. And then I want to show you something a little bit different now, because this now goes to a very local level. So we had something global, something national, and then this is a local level in Curtin, in the humanities faculty. What we did is, because we built our data sets on identifiers, so a lot of different identifiers, so we're able to link our data to actually the data at a local area. So at Curtin University, we linked our data to Curtin's internal data on staff's orchids and where they sit in a university, and we're able to break the data down into the humanities faculty and other faculties as well, and then also into schools, and we can probably go even further if we wanted to in terms of research centers and so on. So it's demonstrating another kind of capability, and I think this has been really helpful, at least in Curtin, at a local level, for the humanities faculties to look at what research has been done in the faculty, but also to see what's missing from the data as well. And I think we have been using this as a conversation with humanities researchers on what are the opportunities and what are the pathways for their work, especially non-traditional research outputs to become visible in such processes, in workflows. And apart from dashboards and visualization, the data has also allowed us to investigate things in traditional, things that are a little more traditional bibliometrics. And in particular, in this one, we're looking at citations, and we wanted to see, well, traditionally we count citations. And we know there are certain issues with just counting citations. And what we wanted to do was to try to think of citations in a different way. And in particular, instead of asking whether a paper gets cited more, can we ask things like, does the paper actually get cited more widely or by more diverse users? So what we did was we looked at our data and said, well, that's actually possible, because we got all these things linking up papers, DOIs, to affiliation IDs, to various different things, and where these institutions are, so to country code, to regions, to sub-regions, even to fields of research and things like that. So we're able to then categorize those citations into basically blocks or bins or categories, if you like, and then we're able to actually ask things about, how diverse are those citation links. And so in this paper, then we actually put all of those together and showed that open access outputs actually receive more diverse citations, which we thought was quite interesting. And I think this also leads to more questionings about, traditional, I guess, ways of measuring research. we can also, building on this, you can also ask things like, perhaps you have collaborations with various authors. How diverse are the collaborations? Same thing as how we're asking how diverse are the citations here. We can also ask things like, while we know open access is cited more diversely or by more diverse users, but is that effect equally spread among different regions? So, and we actually showed a little bit of that in this paper, that the citation advantage in terms of diversity is actually stronger in traditionally more, traditionally more wealthy countries, I guess, compared to countries that have more disadvantage, for example. So a lot of questionings and new things we can ask because of the data that we currently have now. So I guess to put all of that together, so we have this big data, this infrastructure that combines many different data and uses a lot of identifiers and things that can allow us to map across different data sources and all of those things. That also allows us to link to local data, perhaps also pathways for showing, to increase the presence of non-traditional research output. And of course, we know that open data is becoming bigger, and they're also becoming better, actually, in terms of how comprehensive they are. So the improvement is very rapid. So that means that we can now do open science we can do open science on open science with open data, open source, open systems, for example. And we think that this will give us something that's more open, more equitable, and more control in the sense that we're able to use the data to show us things that we think that is important to us, and not just, going back to that conversation about international and local usage. So if we have a data that's quite flexible in this sense, we're able to actually have both, but best of both, I guess, because you can map your stuff to the international standard, but you can also have things that are local that are important. So finally, just the QR code to take you to a whole bunch of dashboards that you can play around with, and thank you.
Okay, technologies. Oh, excellent. A question from online. Thank you so much for your presentation. From Francoise, who asks, is CoARA in touch with Open Science Monitoring Initiative, OSMI?
Yeah, so we do. Cameron Nayland, who's part of, he was also a co-lead on CoARA until recently. But he's still involved with CoARA, and I think he's very much involved with that. So yes, CoARA is definitely in contact with them.
Lee Harris, ARC again. Just in regards to the RISE or REASE dashboard, I guess part of the design for ERA, obviously a dual methodology approach, but ratings are obviously applied by research evaluation committees to obviously apply discipline-specific understanding of what the data actually meant, and was combined with contextual indicators, and that obviously resulted in the end rating. Do you take any additional sort of data into sort of how those ratings are applied, or is it merely sort of arranged through RCI, and do you sort of align that with what the disciplines assume that a citation index actually is, world-leading and things above?
Yeah, so I guess both, because the standard dashboard would be would do everything automated, so following basically the guidelines and just implement whatever the guideline says. But then there's also a different part of the dashboard that allows institutions to actually have their own data as input, so they can have their views as to what they think should be categorized into different categories. So I think, for example, I think we did that as part of a project with UNE. So they have, for their dashboard, they can switch between the standard data that we have and their own institutional data.
Hi, it's Fiona from UNSW again. I really like your point about context, Lee, and I've got a sort of similar question. So one of the challenges in sort of trying to assess where we're going, what we're doing, priorities, etc., is sort of also understanding what are the influences that have happened at particular points in time. So for example, if we look at the open access dashboard, you can immediately see the impact of new publishing agreements. You can see policy changes in there. But you have to know that that's what happened at that time. It'd be wonderful to get a sense of, are there ways, like with the question about context of discipline assessment, to sort of also provide visibility of those events?
Yeah, I think, that's a very good question. And I think, that's always been linking up the data to policies and what's happening is always the tricky part. Because you kind of have to know exactly all the context in the local area, for example, to know what has changed or what has implemented. And I don't think in the dashboard it specifically point out those things. So you kind of have to know the local context to see those.
Yeah, also about the open access dashboard, Alexandra from Serbia, and maybe I'll be repeating some of the previous questions. And I was going through the rankings and was thinking about the factors that influence those rankings, and maybe if there were some confounding variables that are hiding certain differences. For example, I wasn't surprised to see a lot of Latin American countries very high up because they have a very well-developed diamond open access journals. And I was surprised when I saw, for example, that Serbia is around 65% or something like that, and the countries of Western Europe and the US are lower than that, so 40%. So maybe are there any factors that are causing these differences that are not necessarily open access success related? For example, maybe are we catching all of the outputs from Serbian universities because they are maybe don't have DOIs or are in Serbian, which are harder to collect? I'm not saying we are good at relatively good at open science, but I was still surprised by the rankings. So.
So that's a very good question, because the data we currently that runs the dashboard is actually based on Crossref DOIs. So if something doesn't have a Crossref DOI, it would not show up on the dashboard. So and we know that obviously there are a whole bunch of other agencies that assign DOIs. So there are potentially things that are missing in there.
Kat Hayashi from National Institute of Science and Technology Policy in Japan. And your last message about open science research, I totally agree with it. And I'm now involving the meta science community, and maybe do you already have a connection to the meta science community? Because I think you are having a tool for reframing the science activity itself in a whole picture with data. Then the research evaluation will be transformed by that scheme, so that question of open science on open science means that what is science indeed? So that's a question of the meta science community, and those some kind of philosophical question. But now you are having a tool for solve the question with data, with IT, so that then you have a huge potential to do such kind of research. So I would recommend you to connect to the meta science community.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, definitely. Sorry.
Hi, Carl. It's Trish here from ARDC. I also work with the RDA, and I'm with the Curtin Institute for Data Science. What are you looking for in terms of support or collaboration kind of opportunities if you've got access to a global community that could help? What are your asks to progress this really important initiative?
Well, it'd be great if we can get more funding support, of course, always. Well, we are sitting inside a university and in the humanities faculty, which does make some challenges in terms of getting more funding. In the past, we have been supported by the university itself as a core funding, along with a whole bunch of other projects that give us extra support. But yeah, I think we are continuing to always looking for collaboration in terms of using more ways of using the data for good. And if that comes along with project funding, that will be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carl. And while we're still on the topic of some Australian examples, I might just quickly throw to Lee, because you mentioned you might be able to provide us a small update on the research capabilities insight. Just generally, just for our international audience, just to know sort of where we were, where we're heading in Australia.
Sure.
Thank you.
Just for the audience at home, because obviously millions listening. Lee Harris from ARC. No, look, so our previous national scale evaluation exercise ERA, or Excellence in Research for Australia, was formally discontinued by the Minister for Education in 2023. And through a number of sort of policy reform changes around research in higher ed, the ARC, haven't sort of formally been directed yet, but there's a recommendation through one of those reports that the ARC develop a new national research evaluation impact framework that's much broader in scope. So looking at excellence of Australian research, but also the impact and depth of that research as well. I guess formally government has not responded to that recommendation, and the university has a quarter report around that. So part of the work that ARC is doing now is having some really high level I guess consultation discussions with the sector around a new research insights capability as a potential way forward for the ARC to deliver its legislative objective around understanding for research. I guess we've released a very, very high level sort of placemat in like August now this year, alongside a couple other documents as well. So we released our ARC Persistent Identifier Action Plan, which had sort of 5 priority PIDs that we're looking to undertake, and also to sort of try and encompass that together, a bit of a research data framework to provide some advice to the sector about where we see changes to research data maturity needs to move to. We're trying to engage, or we are engaging very closely with the NHMRC as well to make sure we're aligning where we can. So as the 2 funders and covering that 15% of the annual research spend across Australian universities, that we really can sort of show that sort of combined view to the sector as well. So had about sort of 45 discussions with stakeholders as well over the last couple of months. So we're sort of getting some really good feedback as well about the potential way forward. And now it's just sort of trying to collate sort of that and think about next steps as well. So a little bit of sort of watch this space. Obviously happy to chat to anyone as well about research evaluation as we go forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So now I'm just going to throw over to Amy to provide an update of the registry of relevant initiatives that the interest group is working on. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Emma. So some of the other work that this group has been doing, as Emma mentioned, there's the registry of relevant initiatives. So what is this thing? So what we had started off doing was defining different use cases for different stakeholders, right? As we've heard so far today, there are a lot of different types of organizations, people, perspectives that are feeding into this conversation around evaluation of research. The major ones that we had started off with were a researcher perspective, administrator, publisher, funder, and policymaker. Now we have developed some draft information elements, a metadata list, and the start of a data dictionary around these use cases, and are currently in discussion of the metadata list just to make sure that it's relevant for the use cases that we have identified. One of the challenges we continue to work for is we're gathering the information, but how do we make this information accessible to you? Because currently, it's in a Google spreadsheet. So, if you have ideas, please come talk to us. We would love to work together with you because we know that there are so many really great initiatives happening across the globe that illustrate that cultural sensitivity, that regional specificity that we've already heard about today, and bringing them together, we can start working on those global commonalities, right, that are a focus of, I think, part of what we're all here together to think about and work on together about. So please contact me through the RDA platform. I will be honest, the last 6 months have not been great for me, so that's lapsed a little bit, but we are going to pick that work back up. And again, platform thinking for how to effectively share the information, so you can search for things that are like you or in your same region or things like that. Here's a quick look at some of those use cases, right? What you might think about this. So I'm an administrator, there's your role, who wants to revise my institution's approach to evaluating research, right? So thinking about that as a role in a situation in the combination, so you would be able to think about that, search on that for different initiatives and what's happening in those areas. And there's, like I said, there's a whole collection of these, and this is just a small taste, an amuse-bouche, if you would. I also mentioned the information elements, so these are the ones that we have identified so far as a kind of minimal set of what you would need to know from each of these perspectives if you are interested in looking up information on different evaluation initiatives. So thinking about those areas. So like I said, if you are interested in joining this work, please reach out to me through the RDA platform, and we'll get this back on track. Thank you. Yes. If there is a microphone, yes. Totally. Yep.
Is that better? Yes.
So much better.
And now it actually sounds like it's on. So with the evaluation methods, is that a controlled vocabulary or is that just free text?
Right now, it is free text because we don't have enough information to create
so
a
you're
controlled
building one.
vocabulary.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep. Any other questions? All right.
And back to me again. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the disciplinary aspects of research evaluation, which, as I mentioned, is near and dear to my heart because of the difficulty of recognising creative research outputs. So we actually held a workshop on the 25th of March. I can't believe that's like a lifetime ago now. Which was to discuss the possible contribution of RDA to assess the disciplinary aspects of research evaluation, and in particular consider the diversity of research outputs. So, surprise, surprise, another Mentimeter. We really need to get a new way of workshopping online. But anyway, the top outputs beyond traditional publications were, again, surprise, surprise, data and software. So when we did a word cloud, they were coming up as key outputs. And given the RDA community, that's no surprise. But there was really strong agreement that RDA can contribute to the conversation. So would be keen to hear from others in the room today as well. So just a really basic summary, and again, with the help of AI, we found that in terms of research outputs, these were very varied, but we were looking at common research outputs beyond traditional publications, included things like data, software, as I mentioned, peer review, training materials, and code, so software. Obviously, data was still not recognised as an output necessarily across all the people that were surveyed, so there's still clear need for advocacy in this space. Some of the suggested deliverables for us as an interest group included some recommendations for metrics, and so I went to this morning's session on the value of research data and thinking about some of the indicators that we need for evaluating research data, and that was very much spoken about in the context of preservation and disposal, but I think there's also some commonalities to think about across evaluating the value of data, both in terms of like the institutional rankings that we've talked about, but also in terms of individual researchers and their value contribution to the ecosystem. So we'd also be keen to hear from you today about some of the indicators or metrics that you think that we could potentially put together in some kind of deliverable from the interest group, or other kind of mechanisms like use cases, things like that. So where do you think the value of our interest group in thinking about the disciplinary aspects of research, what can we do to add value back to the community? So that's an open question for the group to think about. I mean, does any of this seem surprising? Sometimes I get a little bit not despondent, but I do feel like we spend a lot of time talking about common challenges and the difficulty, but it's very hard to come up with solutions. And so, yeah, I think us as an interest group are really interested in understanding from you as the community what we can do to support you and help drive those conversations further. Otherwise, like the conversation earlier, do we just get stuck in a circular loop between waiting for somebody else to do it and how do we implement? Sandra? Let's just leave it on. I don't think there's any background noise.
Sandra Collins, University College Dublin in Ireland. Thanks, Emma, and I really appreciate where you're coming from with the non-traditional or arts-based research artefacts. So with the cultural heritage data, I'm really interested in this as well. And I was in an interesting session this morning that Natalie was co-chairing, where the question was like, is this research data or say government data or public data sources? And yeah, I guess I really want to advocate for the value of a really well prepared and curated data set like cultural heritage data that I think will be reused, and it probably won't be cited properly, but that's a different problem, but would be used for research much more than a research data set, which is the output of an individual's research project. So that's not very scientific on the metrics there, but I see a great value to these and a great level of reuse, and they're worth investing in and digitally preserving and so on, because they have a great longitudinal value as a research resource. So I'm really happy to see them there, and I hope you can continue to develop that.
Yeah, excellent.
Thanks.
And that is a really good point where you're thinking about the data sets about creative practice versus the researchers who are doing creative work as research outputs. And so that is a bit of a nuance that we need to think about as well.
Hi, Natalie Herwer, CRDCN. I don't know if I'm going to say the same thing as you or different on part of it, but I'm actually involved in a new funded project in Canada by Shirk, but Nat has nothing to do with it. Like, he didn't fund it, so I can talk about it.
So we can't thank him.
Yeah, and it's actually for researchers in the creative area, creative schools, to be able to. What they've realized is the metrics for the kind of work that they do don't exist. So you look at SciVal and you have creative research outputs and there's just nothing in there to track it. And so this is being led by someone who is the dean of research in the creative school and said, we need to find ways. Do we want to, try to suggest an alternate system? Do we want to play with the current system? So what this project, and it's just kicking off, is trying to do is to even articulate vocabularies around how to express impact, and then look at metadata schema to maybe put that together. And frame the language. So I say that because when we look at the deliverables, we have to think about who are we delivering it to. So there are those that are assessing research output that need guidelines, but there's the researchers too. You know, so what can you say? How can you frame your own research in a way that will allow it to be counted in a sense with new metrics, or whatever you want to call non-traditional metrics, right? So maybe we should think of where, because these all look like good deliverables to me, the ones that are suggested on the summary, but think about who the audience for that deliverable is. Could we come up with some very basic guidelines for researchers around how they frame things? And I'll see if I can connect this project a little more formally. It's a 7-year funded project. It's with like 30 partners around the world. So
yeah, excellent.
Maybe we could bring that in formally.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Thanks. Francois would like to say something in the kind of godly element that we have, which is a disconnected body coming out, disconnected voice coming out of the speakers. So Francois, over to you.
I will float above the ocean and join the room now. So you hear me?
Yes,
Can
excellent.
you hear me?
Thank you.
Okay, that's good. So one of the things which is possible because of the way the RDA is organized and the kind of things which are done in the RDA is to connect with the groups which have disciplinary knowledge and to try to discuss with them whether they are interested in participating in one of the things we could try to do is to assess disciplinary aspects of research activity and products, especially linked to data and eventually software in view of the dominant activities and of RDA members. So it's one of the things which was more or less thought about. We did not begin it, but we can begin it after this meeting if you think it makes sense.
Thank you. Thanks, Francois. Sounds like there's a reasonable appetite in the audience for that. All right, if there's no questions or comments, we will move on to a very quick update from Amy just on one of the evaluation of research interest groups outputs. Sorry, I know you're doing online as well.
Spelling mistakes from the notes I took. That's all. So, yes, updating the RDA value for the evaluation of research output. We had put this group had put this document out last year had put it out last year and made a request for comments during the last plenary. So thank you, everyone, for your comments. Really appreciate the thought that you have put into those. I would ask you to go to the current version. And again, on the next slide, there's going to be a QR code again. So with all the links, just so you can check out the slides and correct all of my notes. So please go to the current version, which includes a list of, at that point in time, what were relevant RDA groups, recognizing that there are always new RDA groups coming on board, like the NTRO interest group that Emma visited today, or perhaps that some of you are from. If so, welcome. And make sure that they're included. Now, one of the other things we've thought to include in this space is this table of products that's cited in the text. So these are other initiatives that are out there, other groups that are working in this area. So if you know of anything, please pop them into the meeting notes, and we will use that to work on our next session for the next plenary, and perhaps coordinate a few meetings in between now and then. So really looking for your participation. This is together the work that we're doing to make all of our lives a little bit more respectful of the diversity of work that's happening in our institutions together, or that we're funding across the globe. So thank you. And as promised, QR code.
Oh, up there, yes. That's just to our notes document.
Yes, but the notes document has a link to the slides.
Oh. And now I'm going to hand over to Stephanie to talk about the uptake of Digital Research Infrastructure Interest Group. And I'm right in saying that you were formally endorsed this year? Yeah, so relatively new group that we are liaising with. So over to you, Stephanie.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Stefanie Ketas. I am also a part of the ARDC, as so many of us here. And together with my two colleagues, Liv Shanahan and Kylie Black, I'm co-chairing the uptake of Digital Research Infrastructure Interest Group. So just a little bit of an overview, why do we exist? So a couple of years ago, we started thinking about things like, okay, ARDC is a co-investor in digital research infrastructure. So we work with organizations to build digital research infrastructure. So we, and also our funders, the Department of Education, want to know who actually uses those DRI that we build and what they do with it. And also potentially what they do not do with it and why they don't use it. But in particular, what do people do? How do they use it? How many people use it? Things like that. Now, we report KPIs to the Department of Education, but they're basically numbers, things like how many users, what's the uptime, things like that. And while they're relevant and important, we think those numbers don't really tell the whole story. So then we started thinking about, okay, but what would be the whole story? So what should we be looking at when we talk about even things like uptake, where everyone thinks user numbers, job numbers, downloaded files, but what does it actually mean? What else can we look at to get a bit more of a holistic picture? So, and then we thought about, okay, what do others think? There are so many of us that build these things or work with others to build these things. So how do they do that? And then we also started thinking about, so, okay, we are basically infrastructure, well, we don't use the F word, but we're infrastructure funders, so co-investors, let's put it that way. So that's one role. And some of us are also, we also have some infrastructure that we build in-house, so we're also providers. And some of us are users of other digital research infrastructure, but that's only a couple of the roles. So what are other stakeholders or other key parties in this whole area? And what do they want? And what do they want to know? So these are all the kinds of questions we started thinking about. So we held a couple of BOFs and then turned into an interest group. We've been around since plenary 21 with basically sessions at every plenary. So it's about 5 now, I think. And we also developed a statement of work and were endorsed as an RDA interest group in January this year. So we do exist. And this is just a brief summary of what we are doing in this group. So a couple of things that we really wanted to do for starters is we looked at a bunch of documents on digital research infrastructures, and a lot of them actually didn't define what a digital research infrastructure is. They just assumed that everyone knew, or they defined parts of it, but not the whole lot. So one of the things we wanted to do was define things like, what is a digital research infrastructure? We're still working on that. And what are things like uptake? What does that actually mean? So we're trying to work out the definitions. We're also in parallel doing an environmental scan or literature review. Another output we want to provide is we want to survey the different user groups, or personas as we call them. So funders, providers, users, different types of users, policymakers, and others, and just ask them specific questions about uptake and what they understand of it, what they want to know when they talk about uptake and things like that. We were also working on a typology of categories of digital research infrastructure, because we think that what is uptake for one may not be uptake for the other, so they are very different types. And we want to look at those and how this all hangs together. Build a catalog of both qualitative and quantitative measures of uptake, possibly like a superset that people can pull things out that they think is applicable to their DRI. And then finally, we want to come up with some recommendations for funders, providers, and users of digital research infrastructure. And the outcomes we want to achieve are basically, we want to have a more agreed and shared model for understanding what we mean when we talk about DRI uptake and use, a more common understanding of how we demonstrate uptake and how that actually tells a more compelling story than just having, 500 users, and you don't know, are they just playing, uploading maps, or drawing little diagrams, or are they curing cancer? I mean, that's a big difference in our opinion. We want higher quality evaluations, because hopefully we can help provide an improved set of use and uptake metrics and measures. And we also want to understand the key steps in the pathway between outputs, outcomes, impact, where uptake fits into that. So this was slides we prepared before this plenary. So we had a session yesterday that I know some of you participated in. And we are now at a point where we think we have a pretty final definition of what we mean by digital research infrastructure. We had a really good discussion about uptake, and we also brainstormed a lot of survey questions for the different personas that I just mentioned, like what we want to ask funders, what we want to ask a policy maker user or a researcher user, so things like that. So we're working on those. What we do not have on this slide is a QR code, my apologies. But if you're interested in the group, I'll put the link to the group into the notes. And you can join our group if you haven't already. We will have monthly meetings, possibly not in January or not in December, so we'll skip one of those. But everyone's welcome. At the moment, as I've said, we have 3 co-chairs. They have the drawback of all being from ARDC, which is not good, because we're all one organization and one country. That's not what we want. So we're looking for broader participation from other organizations, and in particular other regions. That would be fantastic. Yeah, and that's it. And if there are any questions?
Did I miss the definition that you said you came up with?
Okay.
No, I could have. I'm always looking up and down.
No, I haven't put it on there.
Oh, okay, okay.
It's in our notes. So because we basically had a definition that we brought to the session yesterday.
Okay.
And the we had a big question around it, which was whether our concept of digital research infrastructure should include creating data. We talked about things that basically help curate, share, analyze, process data, and we talked about quite a lot about whether it also includes creating data. So what we'll do is we'll send the outcomes from that session around in the next couple of weeks to the members of the group, so please join if you want to see those, and hopefully we will then have something that we can actually put to bed.
Okay, so it's not a full definition yet. I'm on a national panel where we're finalizing a white paper on DRI, but I gotta get back to them tonight in my hotel room.
Okay, so please do share when it's published.
Yeah,
that would be fantastic.
Well, that one will be published, but
okay.
Yeah, if there's any even working definition, I'd love to see it, because I could quote it as a temporary thing even.
Okay.
I
can email you what we have tonight. Okay. Thanks, Natalie. Thank you. That's it. Okay. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you for that, Stephanie. And yes, join the DRI group so you too can be notified first of the definition of a digital research infrastructure. So we're coming to the close of this session soon. So we are at the next steps stage. So based on what we have talked about today, what we've heard about today, it feels as if there are a few different areas of work that we could dig into. So I would invite you to take a minute, think about that. Where would you like to see work invested? And this is not the commitment part. Just because you would like to see work invested doesn't mean that your work is being invested in these areas. So think about, where would you, over the next 6 months, like to see some movement, some development? And that will answer the first question of, so what are we doing? What as a community together, where should we be focused next? Or we're happy going along the way we're going along. We're good. We're good. Okay, we're good. We're doing, Emma? Yeah. Devika? Francoise? We're doing great. All right, so if you have no further suggestions for, you're like, yeah, you got it. The priorities you have laid out here, we are on board with. Fabulous. Thank you so much for your validation and endorsement, because we are going to be like silence is endorsement in this case. Thank you. If you are interested in contributing to any of these working areas, these development areas, or if you know of someone that we should be speaking with, that their perspective is one that you think we would find valuable, instructive, please get in touch with us. Have them get in touch with us. Let us know what's going on. If there are efforts that, as you go through, look at our documents, there are efforts that you're like, oh, this should really, really, really be on your radar. I don't see it here. Please, again, put it in the notes, send it to us, put it in the comments on the value proposition there, so that we can take those into account. And again, one of the things we're doing is, we hope to organize a meeting or two with the interest group across the varied time zones between now and the next plenary. So we can continue the conversations and continue, being out there, sensing the community, and being able to be in conversation with the community as well. And we will notify you about when those are. Similar to the DRI, if you would like to have that secret insight into when those meetings are being held, please do join the group. We can't get in touch with you otherwise. It's very, very difficult. So meet us it's not even halfway. To be honest, it's like the first step. It's not even halfway. Just take a step. Join the group. And so for that, we are planning to hold a session for 26. We are in the process right now of putting in our submission. If you have thoughts on what you would like to hear about in plenary P26, share. Please do share. From the conversations, if there was something that really piqued your interest, if you're like, yeah, I'd like to dig into that more. I'd like to hear from this person. They had a really interesting thought. You know who we haven't heard from? This group.
We are the last day of the conference.
I was counting to 10 in my head. All right. Well, let that percolate during the next session. After you get your coffee, get that next little extra kick in there. Get things moving. And we'll look for you at P26. We will look for you in person, with any luck, at P27. And finally, thank you so much. Acknowledging that this is the last group session, interactive section at this plenary. Thank you so much for your engagement. Thank you for your attention. And thank you for your interest in this area.